Gardener faces gold-digging daughter-in-law to save millionaire father's legacy. Walter held Mr. Harrison's trembling hands as the ambulance sped away from the mansion. 30 years tending those gardens, 30 years of evening conversations, and now he watched his employer being taken away without being able to utter a single word. The stroke had been sudden, violent, leaving the 78-year-old businessman trapped in his own body. 2 days later, when Walter arrived early to water the roses that Mr. Harrison loved so much, he found an imported car parked at the main entrance. Amanda stepped out with firm steps, wearing a loud yellow suit that contrasted with the heavy silence of the property. She was the daughter-in-law Mr. Harrison mentioned, with disdain on the rare occasions he spoke about family. The gardener had only seen her 3 times in all those years, always during quick visits that ended in arguments. "You must be the gardener," she said without looking away from her cell phone screen. "Things are going to change around here. My father-in-law needs professional care, not people who spend all day chatting about plants." Walter felt his chest tighten, but remained calm. He knew Mr. Harrison's temperament well. The businessman was stubborn, detail-oriented, suspicious. He would never let someone like Amanda control his business, much less his life. But now he was at the clinic, unable to defend himself. "So you'll be staying here then?" asked Walter, choosing his words carefully. "I'll be doing more than staying. I have power of attorney. I'm responsible for all his medical and financial decisions now." She finally looked up, assessing the gardener with a mix of contempt and impatience. "I hope you're not the type to cause problems. It would be a shame to lose your job after so long, wouldn't it?" At that moment, Walter realized he was beginning a much bigger battle than he had imagined. Amanda wasn't just a disinterested daughter-in-law visiting her sick father-in-law. There was something calculated in her movements, something cold in her gaze. She had arrived prepared, armed with documents, and seemed determined to take control of everything. In the following days, the mansion was invaded by changes. Amanda brought a team of private security guards, installed cameras in every room, hired nurses she selected herself. Mrs. Wilson, the housekeeper who had worked there for 15 years, was fired on the 2nd day. Mr. Thompson, the trusted driver, was let go soon after. One by one, the long-time employees were replaced by people loyal only to Amanda. Walter was kept on, but his duties changed drastically. He could no longer enter the main house. His salary was cut in half. The gardening tools Mr. Harrison had bought were locked away, and he was given only the basics to do his work. It was calculated humiliation, a form of pressure to make him quit on his own. But Walter wasn't leaving. He couldn't. Mr. Harrison had been more than an employer during those 30 years. He had been a friend, someone who respected him, who asked about his family, who helped him when his wife got sick years ago. The businessman paid for the treatments, gave him time off, never asked for anything in return. Walter owed him much more than professional loyalty. He owed gratitude, respect, true friendship. One afternoon, while pruning the azaleas near the office window, Walter heard raised voices. Amanda was arguing with someone on the phone. "No, he hasn't signed anything yet. The old lawyer is complicating things, says he needs to speak with my father-in-law in person. I'm handling this." "Yes, I've already found another one who will do what I say. Don't worry, we'll have access to everything soon." The gardener felt a chill. Was she making Mr. Harrison sign things? Important documents? The businessman could barely hold a pen. How could he understand what he was signing? That night, Walter couldn't sleep. His small room at the back of the property felt like a prison. He went over every detail of the last few weeks, trying to find a way to help his boss. But what could he do? He was just a gardener. He had no money for lawyers, didn't know the laws, had no influence. The next morning, Amanda called all the remaining employees for a meeting. "Starting today, you will follow a new set of rules," she announced, handing out printed sheets. "Fixed schedules, no exceptions. No unnecessary conversations. Everyone does their job and leaves. And most importantly, no one enters the room where my father-in-law is recovering. Only the authorized medical team has access. But we were always allowed to visit Mr. Harrison when he was sick," Walter dared to say. "He likes company, likes knowing we're nearby. He needs rest, not employees interfering with his treatment," Amanda cut him off. "And since you brought it up, Walter, you are being demoted. You will now only take care of the back exterior area. I've hired a professional landscaper for the front part." The blow was hard. The front area was Mr. Harrison's pride, the gardens he and Walter had planned together over the years. Every rose, every tree had a story, and now it would be cared for by a stranger. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. 3 weeks passed. Walter worked in silence, always alert. He observed Amanda's movements, the visitors who arrived, the conversations he could overhear. The daughter-in-law had established a meticulous routine. Every morning she would enter Mr. Harrison's room with one of the nurses. She stayed there for about an hour. Then she spent the rest of the day in the office, making calls, receiving people in suits. One of these people was Brian, Mr. Harrison's son. Walter had known him since he was a child, but they had never been close. Brian had lived in Los Angeles for years, managing his own businesses, and visited his father rarely. Now, with the illness, he showed up on weekends, but always accompanied by Amanda. She monopolized the conversations, controlled what Brian saw, filtered the information. "Daddy is being very well taken care of," she would say, in a soft voice. "The doctors say it's just a matter of time before he starts to improve. But he needs peace, you know how it is. Too much stimulation could hinder his recovery." Brian accepted everything without question. He seemed relieved to have someone handling the situation, allowing him to focus on his own business. Walter tried to speak to him once, but Amanda was always nearby, and the young businessman treated the gardener with the same polite distance as always. It was during a forced cleaning of the office that Walter found the first real clue. Amanda had ordered all the old furniture to be removed to make way for a modern decor. While pushing a heavy wooden bookcase, he noticed something strange. There was a small gap between the bookcase and the wall, almost imperceptible. There, stuck with yellowed tape, was a manila envelope. The gardener looked around. He was alone. The new housekeeper was on another floor. The security guards were outside. With sweaty hands, he took the envelope and quickly hid it inside his shirt. He continued the cleaning as if nothing had happened, but his heart was beating erratically. That night, locked in his room, Walter opened the envelope. Inside were 3 handwritten pages with Mr. Harrison's unmistakable handwriting. The date at the top was from 8 months ago. "If someone is reading this, it means something has happened to me. Walter, if it's you who found this, I trust you. Amanda is not reliable. I discovered she has huge debts and is being sued for fraud in another business. I fear she may try to take advantage of me. I prepared an important document that is kept in a safe place. Look for Dr. Edward Sullivan, my trusted lawyer. He knows everything. And if you need to open the safe, the key is where we planted the first rose together. The combination is my mother's and my father's birthdays in that order." Walter read and reread the words. Mr. Harrison had foreseen everything. But Dr. Edward Sullivan, he vaguely remembered the name. An elegant gentleman who visited the mansion from time to time, always with a worn leather briefcase. But it had been years since he'd seen him. The next morning, Walter called all the law firms he knew, asking for Dr. Edward. It took 3 days to get useful information. The lawyer had retired 2 years ago and moved to Westchester, where he had a country house. No one had an updated contact number. Meanwhile, Amanda intensified her control. More cameras were installed. Employees now had to clock in and out using an electronic system. Access to the main house was further restricted. Walter could only enter to clean specific areas, always accompanied. "We've had problems with theft," Amanda explained in a meeting. "Valuable objects have disappeared, so now we follow maximum security protocol." No one really believed there were thieves, but no one dared to question it. The few remaining employees needed their jobs, and Amanda made it clear that any disobedience would result in immediate dismissal, without references. Walter began to feel constantly watched. The cameras followed his movements. The security guards were always nearby. He needed to be extremely careful. He couldn't give any sign that he knew something. It was then that he remembered Mrs. Henderson. The former housekeeper had been fired right at the beginning, but they had exchanged numbers. She lived in a working-class neighborhood of New York City, in a simple house she shared with her daughter. Walter waited for a day off and went to visit her. Mrs. Henderson received him with tears in her eyes. "Walter, I knew you would show up. I need to tell you some things, but I'm afraid," she said, looking nervously at the street. "You can talk, Mrs. Henderson. I'm trying to help Mr. Harrison." The 67-year-old woman served coffee and sat down heavily in her chair. "On the day they fired me, I had seen something horrible the night before. It was late. I had forgotten my purse in the office. When I went back to get it, I heard voices in Mr. Harrison's room. I peeked through the half-open door and saw that witch, Amanda, holding his hand, forcing him to hold a pen. Mr. Harrison was sedated, his eyes half closed, mumbling nonsense. She was guiding his hand on a paper, making him sign. "My God," whispered Walter. "I entered the room. I said I was going to call Brian, that this wasn't right. She became furious, told me I hadn't seen anything, that if I said anything she would ruin me. The next day she fired me, claiming I had stolen jewelry. She spread that to everyone. No one wanted to hire me after that. My reputation was destroyed. Do you have any proof?" "No. But there's something else." Mrs. Henderson got up and went to a closet, returning with a shoebox. "I kept some things from Mr. Harrison's office over the years. Little things he was going to throw away, but that I thought were important. There are old letters, receipts, notes. I don't know if it helps with anything." Walter spent the entire afternoon examining the contents of the box. There was everything. Old family photos, business letters, newspaper clippings about Mr. Harrison's businesses. And then at the bottom he found an old business card with worn edges, Dr. Edward Sullivan, with an address in Westchester and a phone number. "Mrs. Henderson, you're an angel," said Walter, carefully putting away the card. That night he called the number. It rang several times before a hoarse voice answered. "Hello? Dr. Edward? My name is Walter. I worked with Mr. Harrison Wainwright. I really need to speak with you about an urgent situation." There was a long pause. "Is Harrison okay?" The lawyer's voice sounded worried. "No, doctor. He had a stroke a few weeks ago. And there's someone trying to take advantage of him. I found a letter he left, saying you knew important things." "My God, I feared this would happen." Dr. Edward sighed heavily. "Listen, we can't talk on the phone. Can you come to Westchester? Tomorrow?" Walter asked for time off, citing family problems. Amanda agreed with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. He knew she was suspicious, but he couldn't wait. He caught a bus from the station at 5 in the morning. Dr. Edward's house was in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by trees. The lawyer, now 80 years old, greeted him on the porch. "Harrison told me a lot about you over the years," said the doctor, serving a glass of water. "He said you were one of the few he could really trust. Do you know about the will?" "I know more than that. I know everything." Dr. Edward got up with difficulty and went inside, returning with a thick folder. "Harrison came to me a year ago, extremely worried. He had discovered that his daughter-in-law was involved in several frauds. He investigated on his own, hired detectives, gathered evidence. She had embezzled money from a social project, forged documents, was being sued, and worst of all, she was manipulating Brian, convincing him that his father was becoming senile, planting the idea that it would be necessary to take control of the business. Why didn't Mr. Harrison report her? Because he loved his son. He didn't want to destroy Brian's marriage. He didn't want to cause a family scandal. But he wasn't naive. He prepared everything to protect himself. He made a new will, very specific. He left most of the fortune to social projects for rural workers, a generous amount for you, and only a smaller portion for Brian, on the condition that he separate from Amanda. Walter felt the weight of that revelation. And where is this will? Harrison insisted on keeping the only original copy in a safe in the mansion itself. He said that way he would have total control, that he could change it if he wanted. I tried to convince him to leave it with me, but he was stubborn. Dr. Edward opened the folder and showed copies of documents. "I only have these scanned copies. They have no legal value. We need the original." He mentioned a safe in the letter. He said the key is where we planted the first rose together. The lawyer smiled sadly. The century-old rose bush, the one in the corner of the main garden near the stone wall. You two planted it 30 years ago, didn't you? Harrison told me the story. It was his mother's favorite rose. Walter remembered perfectly. It was his first day of work. Mr. Harrison had just bought the mansion and wanted to start the gardens with that special rose bush brought from a nursery in Vermont. They spent the whole afternoon preparing the soil, adjusting the depth, watering carefully. But how am I going to dig there with all those cameras and security? We'll have to be smart, said Dr. Edward, and we need to act fast. If Amanda manages to get Harrison to sign a new will while he's debilitated, and if she gets witnesses to say he was lucid, it will be very hard to challenge later. They spent hours planning. Dr. Edward had contacts, knew people who could help, but everything depended on getting the original will. Without it, they had nothing concrete. Walter returned to the mansion in the late afternoon. Amanda was waiting for him at the entrance with her arms crossed. "Where have you been?" "Visiting a sick relative, as I mentioned." "Which relative?" "A cousin in the Bronx." She examined him with cold eyes. "Interesting, because I called the number you left as an emergency contact, and the person who answered said you don't have any cousin in the Bronx." Walter's blood ran cold. She had investigated. "They must have gotten confused. Sometimes my brother-in-law answers." "Don't try to fool me." Amanda took a step forward. "I know you're up to something, but I'll make one thing clear. If you keep meddling in matters that don't concern you, you'll regret it. It's not just me you'll be dealing with. I have lawyers, I have influence, I can make your life a living hell. I just want to know how Mr. Harrison is doing." "He's fine, getting better every day. And he doesn't need you interfering with his treatment." That night, Walter could barely close his eyes. He needed to find a way to get to the rose bush, dig, get the key. But how? That area was always lit. There was always someone around. The answer came unexpectedly. 2 days later, a violent storm hit New York City. Strong winds, torrential rain, power outages in several neighborhoods. The mansion was in the dark for a few hours. The emergency generators only powered the internal lights of the main house and the basic security system. The garden was left in the shadows. It was the chance Walter had been waiting for. He grabbed a small shovel, a flashlight, and went out into the rain. The storm muffled any noise. He ran to the century-old rosebush, knelt in the mud, and began digging around the ancient roots. 10 centimeters, 20, 30, nothing. Was he in the wrong spot? He dug deeper, being careful not to damage the roots. And then the shovel hit something solid. A metal box, rusty but intact. Walter pulled it out with force. It was heavy, sealed. There was no time to open it there. He hugged it to his chest, quickly covered the hole, and ran back to his room. Inside, trembling from cold and anxiety, he forced the old lock with a screwdriver. The box opened with a creak. Inside, wrapped in protective plastic, was an official document. The will of Harrison Wainwright, dated 12 months ago, signed, notarized, with all the legal formalities, and with it a small silver key with a number engraved, 847. Walter read the entire will. It was exactly as Dr. Edward had described. Most of the fortune went to social projects, a sum of $500,000 for him, Walter, and for Brian a smaller portion, but only if he separated from Amanda within 6 months after the will was read. There was also a personal letter, handwritten. "Walter, my friend, if you're reading this, it means things went exactly as I feared. Amanda is dangerous, but you are strong. I trust you to do what's right. The safe deposit box with the supplementary documents is at the bank, and this key is for it. Dr. Edward has the details. Don't give up. My conscience is at ease knowing you're around. You've been more of a son to me than my own flesh and blood many times, Harrison." Tears streamed down Walter's face. He held the document to his chest. He had the proof he needed in his hands. But he knew the battle was just beginning. The next morning he called Dr. Edward and told him about the discovery. The lawyer was relieved. "Perfect. Now we need to act legally. I'll contact a trusted judge. I'll request an independent medical evaluation of Harrison. But Walter, you need to be very careful. Keep that document in a safe place. Don't let Amanda find out." "And the bank safe?" We'll need Harrison's authorization or a court order to open it. I'll work on that. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us, who are just starting out. Now continuing. Walter hid the will in the ceiling lining of his room, in a place only he knew. But Amanda had noticed something different. She intensified her surveillance on him. The security guards now followed his every move. She herself would appear unexpectedly when he was working, asking questions, testing him. "Walter, I'm thinking of letting you go," she said one afternoon while he was trimming a hedge. "I don't know if I still need a gardener. I can outsource the work." "As you wish," he replied, keeping his voice steady. "But you know what's funny? I noticed the soil near the century-old rosebush has been disturbed. Someone dug there during the storm. Do you know anything about that?" "It must have been the heavy rain. That corner always collects water." She approached, studying his face. "You're smarter than you look, aren't you? But be careful. There are people who think they're smart and end up in big trouble." 2 days later, things got worse. Amanda gathered all the staff and announced that a valuable object had disappeared from the house, an antique watch that belonged to Mr. Harrison. She said she was sure it had been stolen, that she was going to call investigators. "I'm going to search everyone's quarters," she declared. "Those with nothing to hide won't mind." Walter felt panic. If she searched his room, she would find the will. He needed to get the document out of there, but how? Amanda had ordered that no one leave the property until the search was completed. It was Mrs. Henderson who saved the situation. Walter managed to call her quickly from the bathroom, explaining the problem. The lady arrived at the mansion an hour later, confronting Amanda with courage. "I worked here for 15 years, said Mrs. Henderson, her voice trembling but firm. "I know this house better than you, and I know you're lying about the watch. Mr. Harrison sold that watch 2 years ago to pay for an employee's surgery. I was there when he signed the papers." "Get out of here before I call security," snarled Amanda. "Go ahead and call, but I'll also call a reporter I know. I think he'd love to do a story about how you're keeping a sick elderly man isolated, forcing him to sign documents, stealing the inheritance that should go to social causes." The threat worked. Amanda turned pale. She couldn't risk public exposure now, not when she was so close to completing her plans. "You have no proof of anything," she said, but her voice came out less confident. "Not yet, but I will get it." Mrs. Henderson left before the situation escalated, but her intervention bought Walter time. That night, he placed the will inside a waterproof plastic bag, wrapped it in several layers of protection, and buried it in a flower bed far from the house, marking the spot with a specific stone. The next day, when Amanda searched the staff's quarters, she found nothing. She was visibly frustrated but had to back down. The weeks passed in constant tension. Walter continued working, but each day was a test of endurance. Amanda invented humiliating tasks, cut his salary even more, treated him as if he were less than nothing. But he didn't leave. Dr. Edward was working behind the scenes. He had contacted the private doctor who had always taken care of Mr. Harrison, Dr. Morrison, a respected cardiologist with almost 40 years of experience. The doctor agreed to make an unofficial visit to the mansion, but he needed access to the patient. "Amanda won't allow it," said Walter on the phone. "She controls everything. Only her doctors are allowed in the room. Then we need to create a situation where she's forced to let us in," replied Dr. Edward. "I'll work on that." The opportunity came unexpectedly. Brian called saying he'd visit his father the following weekend and was bringing his younger sister, Jennifer, who lived in Boston and couldn't come earlier due to work. Amanda couldn't deny her sister-in-law's visit without raising suspicions. Dr. Morrison offered to go along, telling Brian that as an old family friend, he wanted to see how Mr. Harrison was doing. The son saw no problem with that. Saturday morning, Walter woke with a gut feeling. That day would be decisive in some way. He tended the gardens as usual, but stayed alert to the movement in the main house. Brian arrived around 10 o'clock, accompanied by Jennifer. The 32-year-old woman had red eyes, obviously worried about her father. Dr. Morrison arrived half an hour later with his traditional leather briefcase. Amanda greeted them with false politeness, but Walter noticed the tension in her shoulders. She hadn't expected the doctor. "Dr. Morrison, what a surprise," she said, her smile forced. "I couldn't miss visiting my longest-standing patient," the doctor replied calmly. "Harrison and I have been friends for decades. How is he?" "Stable. The new team has been taking very good care of him." "I'm glad to hear that. May I see him?" Amanda hesitated, but with Brian and Jennifer there, she couldn't refuse. "Of course, but he's sleeping now. Better not to disturb him." "I won't disturb him. Just a quick look. Check his vitals." They went up to the room. Walter, from the garden, watched the windows. 10 minutes passed, 15, 20. Then he heard loud voices. Jennifer was shouting. There was movement, hurried footsteps. Dr. Morrison came down the stairs quickly, his face serious. He went straight to his car, grabbed a medical device and ran back inside. Amanda was pale, trying to calm Jennifer, who was crying. "What have you done to my father?" the young woman shouted. "He's unrecognizable. He doesn't react to anything. His eyes—" "Everything is under control," Amanda said, her voice tense. "It's the recovery process. The doctor said it's normal." "Normal? He looks like he's drugged." Brian was confused, looking from one to the other. "Amanda, what's going on?" "Dad really doesn't look well." Dr. Morrison returned to the room. When he came down again half an hour later, his expression was grave. "Brian, Jennifer, we need to talk. In private." They went to the library. Amanda tried to follow, but the doctor was firm. "Immediate family only, please." The door closed. Amanda stayed outside, clearly nervous. She took out her phone and started making frantic calls. Walter approached the house under the pretext of watering the plants near the windows. He managed to hear part of the conversation through a slightly open window. "The medications he's taking are completely inappropriate for his condition," Dr. Morrison was saying. "He's being sedated beyond what's necessary. The cocktail of drugs I identified keeps anyone in a state of mental confusion, almost an induced stupor. This isn't treatment, it's chemical restraint." "But Amanda's doctors said it was best for him," Brian replied, confused. "Which doctors?" "I want to see the prescriptions, the reports. Because as his cardiologist for 30 years, I guarantee this isn't the correct treatment for someone who had a stroke." "Are you saying my wife is doing something wrong on purpose?" "I'm saying your father is being medicated in a way that keeps him unable to react, to express his wishes, to sign documents consciously. And that raises very serious questions." There was a heavy silence. "Jennifer, did you see Dad before Amanda arrived?" Brian asked. "Yes. I visited the clinic 2 days after the stroke. He was weakened, of course, but responded to stimuli. He squeezed my hand, tried to speak. He was fighting to recover." Her voice was choked up. "The man I saw today isn't fighting. He's sedated, Brian," Dr. Morrison continued. "I need to conduct independent tests, bring in other specialists. But I can say that with proper treatment, your father has a good chance of recovering most of his abilities. The stroke was serious, but not as devastating as you were led to believe." Walter felt his heart race. The pieces were falling into place. Amanda wasn't just trying to steal the inheritance. She was deliberately keeping Mr. Harrison incapacitated to control him completely. The library door opened. Brian came out first, his face set. He went straight to confront Amanda. "I want to see my father's medical prescriptions, now." "Brian, don't be ridiculous. You're letting this old doctor fill your head with—" "The documents, Amanda!" he shouted, surprising everyone. Brian was usually calm, controlled. Amanda stepped back but quickly regained her composure. "Everything's in the office, I'll get it." She hurried up the stairs. Walter saw through the window that she entered the office but didn't come out right away. She was doing something in there. A few minutes later, she came down with a folder. "Here are all the prescriptions signed by the doctors I hired. Qualified professionals, not retired people living off past glories." Dr. Morrison examined the papers, his expression growing increasingly serious. "These medications, Brian, half of these drugs shouldn't be taken together. It's a dangerous cocktail. And look at the dosages. They're way beyond the recommended amounts." "The doctors know what they're doing," Amanda insisted. Then I want to talk to them. I want their contacts, their licenses. I want to understand the logic of this treatment. You have no authority over my father-in-law's treatment. I have full power of attorney. Power of attorney. Jennifer spoke up for the first time. Daddy gave you power of attorney? He who barely speaks to you on the rare occasions you show up here? He signed all the necessary documents, with witnesses, all legal. When? When did he sign this? One day before the stroke. He was lucid, had consulted lawyers, everything was done properly. How convenient, said Jennifer, her voice dripping with sarcasm. One day before becoming incapacitated, he decides to give you total control of everything. You, whom he always criticized, said you were opportunistic. Watch what you say. Amanda's voice came out dangerously low. I could sue you for defamation. Sue me. But first, let's thoroughly investigate these documents you have. Brian was in obvious conflict. It was his wife against his family. He looked at Amanda, then at his sister, at Dr. Morrison. Amanda, explain one thing to me, he said slowly. Why didn't you tell me about the power of attorney before? Why just show up here and take over everything without talking to me? Because you were busy with your business in Los Angeles. Someone had to make quick decisions. But I'm his son. I should have been consulted. Your father chose me, not you. Maybe because he knew you wouldn't have the firmness needed to make tough decisions. The comment was like a slap. Brian turned red. Firmness or cruelty? You fired all the employees who had worked here for years. People my father respected who took care of him. Why? Because they were inefficient. I brought in better professionals. Professionals loyal to you, you mean? Jennifer cut in. The argument was escalating. Dr. Morrison intervened. Look, we can resolve this civilly. I'll prepare a full medical report. I'll recommend changes to the treatment. If Amanda really wants what's best for Harrison, she won't oppose this. I don't oppose anything that's truly beneficial for him, said Amanda, but her eyes said otherwise. Walter watched everything from a distance, his heart heavy. Things were starting to move, but he knew Amanda wouldn't simply give up. She had invested too much in that plan to back down now. That night, after Brian and Jennifer left promising to return soon, Walter saw Amanda making several calls in the garden. She was nervous, gesturing a lot. The next day, 3 men in suits arrived. They were lawyers. They spent hours in the office with her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Dr. Edward called Walter that afternoon. Things are moving. Dr. Morrison gave me the information. We're going to request a court-ordered medical evaluation. But Walter, Amanda won't stand still. She'll try something. Stay alert. The warning came too late. The next day, Walter was called to the main office. Amanda was there with one of the lawyers and 2 large security guards. Walter, serious accusations have been made against you, began the lawyer, his voice formal. Mrs. Amanda Wainwright has identified that several expensive tools have disappeared from the gardening shed. Tools that add up to more than $3,000. She also noticed that you've been trying to enter the main house during unauthorized hours, and there are reports that you were seen digging in restricted areas during last week's storm. I didn't steal anything, said Walter, keeping calm, and I work in the gardens. Obviously, I'll dig in various areas. We also have information that you contacted Mr. Harrison's former lawyer, posing as a family representative, continued the lawyer. This constitutes false representation. I never pretended to be anyone. I just said I knew Mr. Harrison. Regardless, you're fired for just cause. Leave the property immediately. Your belongings will be sent to the address we have on file. You can't do this. Walter felt anger rising. I've worked here for 30 years. We can and we are, said Amanda, a cold smile on her lips. And if you try to resist or come back here, I'll file a complaint for trespassing. These 2 security guards will escort you to the gate, now. Walter was escorted like a criminal. He passed through the garden he'd cared for over 3 decades, saw the rose bushes he'd planted, the grass he'd trimmed thousands of times. Every step was a humiliation. But the worst was knowing he was being kept away from Mr. Harrison just when his boss needed him most. At the gate, he turned to the security guards. "I didn't do anything wrong, I just wanted to help my boss." "We're just following orders," one of them replied without emotion. Walter went to the small one-bedroom apartment he rented in the Queens neighborhood. He needed to think, reorganize his thoughts. The will was still buried at the mansion, and he couldn't go back there anymore. He called Dr. Edward and explained the situation. "This is terrible," said the lawyer, "but don't give up. I'll file a legal action so you can recover the document, but it will take time. The legal process is slow. And meanwhile, Amanda will do whatever she wants with Mr. Harrison." "Not necessarily. Brian and Jennifer are suspicious now. Dr. Morrison is applying pressure. Things won't be so easy for her." But things got worse before they got better. 2 days later, Amanda gave an interview to a local newspaper, presenting herself as the dedicated daughter-in-law caring for her sick father-in-law. She talked about the difficulties, about how some unscrupulous employees tried to take advantage of the situation, about a gardener she had to fire for theft. "It was a very difficult decision to make," she said in the article with fake tears in her eyes. "He worked here for years, but unfortunately greed got the better of him. He tried to steal valuable objects, tried to manipulate my father-in-law. I had to act to protect the family." The report painted Walter as a villain and Amanda as a victim. He was devastated. His reputation was being publicly destroyed. Mrs. Henderson showed up at his apartment that night. "Walter, don't give up. I know the truth. Many people know the truth. That woman will fall, you can be sure." "But how? She has money, lawyers, control of everything, and I have nothing. You have something much more valuable. You have the truth, and you have people who believe in you." She was right. In the following days, other former employees began to speak up. Mr. Thompson, the former driver, gave an interview contradicting Amanda, saying that Walter was an honest man who would never steal. The cook, who had been fired, also spoke out. The local seamstress, who had been doing repairs at the mansion for years, wrote a letter defending Walter. Small gestures, but they began to create a different narrative. Dr. Morrison obtained a court order for an independent medical evaluation of Mr. Harrison. Amanda tried to block it, but with Brian and Jennifer supporting the request, the judge authorized it. The evaluation took place a week later. 3 specialists spent an entire day examining the businessman. The results were devastating for Amanda. The medical report concluded that Mr. Harrison was being improperly medicated, that the drugs were keeping him in a state of artificial mental confusion, and that with proper treatment, he could recover much of his cognitive and motor abilities. The document also pointed to signs of medical negligence and possible bad faith. Brian was shocked when he read the report. He confronted Amanda once again, this time more firmly. "You lied to me. You said Dad was getting the best treatment, and all along he was being drugged. I followed the recommendations of the doctors I hired. Doctors you chose. Doctors who might not have been the most qualified, but the most willing to do what you told them. You're being influenced by your sister. Jennifer has always hated me. Don't change the subject. I want to see that power of attorney. I want to see all the documents you say Dad signed." Amanda went to get the papers. She presented a series of documents, all apparently in order, all with Mr. Harrison's signature. There were witnesses, notarizations, everything very well done. But Brian was starting to see things differently. He took the documents to be analyzed by a handwriting expert. Meanwhile, Dr. Edward Sullivan obtained a court order for Walter to return to the mansion, accompanied by a court officer, to retrieve personal belongings. It was the chance he needed. On the scheduled day, Walter returned to the property. Amanda was there, watching every move. The court officer accompanied him to the old room. Walter gathered his clothes, some personal items, but what he really wanted was buried in the garden. He asked permission to see the gardens one last time. "No way," said Amanda. "You're no longer an employee here." "Actually, ma'am, the request is reasonable," intervened the court officer. "He worked here for decades. A few minutes in the garden won't harm anyone." Amanda couldn't refuse without seeming even more cruel. She agreed, but sent a security guard to accompany him. Walter walked through the gardens, feeling every step. It was a farewell. He knew he would probably never return there. He stopped in front of the century-old rose bush. The flowers were wilted, poorly cared for. The new gardener didn't have the same affection. "This rose bush here, I planted it with my boss 30 years ago," he told the security guard, his voice choked. "It was my first day of work. We spent the whole afternoon preparing the soil." The security guard didn't respond, but his face softened a bit. Walter knelt down, pretending to examine the roots. "It's infested," he murmured. "Needs special care." As he spoke, his hands worked quickly in the soil. He found the marker stone, dug discreetly. There was the plastic bag. He grabbed it in a swift motion and hid it inside his shirt. "Done," he said, standing up. "I think I've seen all I needed to." Back at the gate, Amanda was waiting with her arms crossed. "Don't come back here. Ever again." "Don't worry, I won't need to." Walter left, carrying the will with him. Finally, he had the physical proof in his hands. He went straight to Dr. Edwards' office in Westchester. The lawyer examined the document carefully, checking every seal, every signature. "It's perfect, completely valid. Now we need to present this officially." "But Amanda has that power of attorney. How are we going to prove it's fake?" "Brian is working on that. The handwriting analysis should be out this week. And there's more. Dr. Morrison got other doctors who treated Harrison in recent years to come forward. They're saying the businessman was perfectly lucid and competent until the day of the stroke, which contradicts any claim that he was senile or incapable of making decisions. The pieces were falling into place, but Amanda wasn't foolish. She realized she was losing ground and decided to make one last desperate move. A week later, she called an urgent family meeting. Brian, Jennifer, and several other distant relatives were summoned. Dr. Edward managed to get Walter included, since the will mentioned him. In the main room of the mansion, Amanda presented another document. A will dated just 2 months ago, supposedly more recent than the one Walter had found. "This is my father-in-law's last will," she announced. "It was made with full awareness, witnessed by a notary, and in it he leaves me the majority of the assets, so I can manage them properly." "That's a lie," Jennifer burst out. "Dad would never do that." "It's all here, documented, legal." Brian took the document and examined it. The signature appeared to be his father's. The dates were correct. But something didn't add up. "Amanda, I want you to be honest with me. Is this document real?" "Of course it's real. Do you think I would make something like this up?" "I don't know what to think of you anymore." Dr. Edward asked to see the document. He studied every line, every word. "This will completely contradicts the previous one, and conveniently cancels all donations to charities, all provisions for employees, everything goes to Amanda. What a coincidence." "It's not a coincidence. It's Harrison's will. He realized his family wouldn't properly care for the estate and trusted me. Then why did he make the other will? The one Walter found?" "That one is older. This is more recent, so it prevails." "Let's see what the court says about that," Dr. Edward said calmly. The legal battle began in earnest. Both wills were presented. Experts were called to analyze the signatures, the dates, the validity of each document. The process dragged on for weeks. During this time, Mr. Harrison started receiving proper treatment. Dr. Morrison obtained a court order to change the medication. The results were almost immediate. Within a few days, the businessman began to respond better. In 2 weeks, he managed to utter simple words. In a month, he was having short conversations. The first thing he asked for was to see Walter. Brian took the gardener to visit his father at the hospital where he had been transferred for intensive care. When Walter entered the room, tears began to fall before he even said anything. Mr. Harrison was sitting in the bed, thin, pale, but with eyes alive for the first time in months. "Wah, Sartre," he said, his voice weak but clear. "Mr. Harrison," Walter held his hand, "you're doing better. My daughter, in law, bad. I know, we're taking care of it. You don't need to worry. Will, I found it. It was where you said, under the rose bush." A faint smile appeared on the businessman's face. "Knew you would make it." It was an emotional moment. Brian witnessed the genuine connection between his father and the gardener. He realized that Walter wasn't just an employee. He was someone his father considered real family. The results of the handwriting analysis came in the following week. The report was conclusive. The signature on the most recent will, the one presented by Amanda, was forged. There were inconsistencies in the curves, the pen pressure, the writing patterns. It was a well-done forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. When the report was presented, Amanda turned pale. She tried to argue, said there must be a mistake, that she would hire other experts. But it was too late. The evidence was clear. Her lawyers advised her to make a deal. She could be charged with document forgery, fraud, embezzlement. She could go to jail. Brian was devastated. The woman he had been married to for 8 years, the mother of his 2 children, had tried to steal the inheritance from his own sick father. He couldn't process it. "Why, Amanda?" he asked, his voice broken. "We didn't have money problems. You didn't need to do this." "You don't understand," she replied, for the first time showing real emotion. "Your father always looked at me as if I wasn't good enough, always treated me as if I was just a gold digger. I just wanted to prove that I could control everything, that I was capable." "Proving exactly what he always thought? That you were a gold digger?" "I am not a gold digger. I just wanted what was rightfully mine. I am part of this family. Not anymore." Brian filed for divorce the next day. Amanda tried to fight, tried to negotiate, but there was nothing left to negotiate. She signed the separation papers and agreed not to contest the original will in exchange for not being criminally prosecuted. It was a spectacular fall from grace. The woman who weeks ago controlled an entire mansion, who gave orders to everyone, who seemed invincible, now left defeated, humiliated, alone. With Amanda out of the way, life began to normalize. Mr. Harrison continued his recovery. He would never be completely like he was before the stroke, but he recovered much more than the doctors initially expected. He could speak, walk with help, and most importantly, he was lucid. The original will was validated. Most of the fortune was allocated to the social projects he always wanted to fund. A large sum went to Walter, as promised, and Brian received his share, now free of any conditions. Walter used the money in a way he knew his boss would approve. He bought a large plot of land on the outskirts of New York City and began building a support center for retired farm workers. A place where they could live with dignity, have medical assistance, cultivate gardens, live their final years in peace. Mr. Harrison, as soon as he had enough strength, went to visit the project. Walter took him around the property in a wheelchair, showing him the plans, the ongoing construction. "You are doing it right," said the businessman, his eyes shining. "Always knew. It wouldn't be possible without you, without your trust, without your friendship all these years." "No, friendship." Mr. Harrison held Walter's arm with surprising strength. "Brotherhood." It was the perfect word. They weren't boss and employee. They weren't just friends. They were brothers chosen by life, united by decades of mutual respect, trust, and genuine care. Brian also changed. The experience with Amanda had transformed him. He started visiting his father regularly, began managing the family business more closely, and developed a relationship of respect with Walter. "It took me too long to realize," he said one day, while having coffee on the mansion's porch. "My father was right about many things, about values, about what's truly important, about who the people are that deserve our loyalty." "Your father is a wise man," replied Walter, "always has been." Mrs. Henderson returned to work at the mansion, now as general supervisor. She rehired some of the old staff that Amanda had fired. The house regained its former welcoming atmosphere. The gardens flourished again under Walter's care. He went back to working there a few times a week, not out of necessity, but out of love. Those gardens were part of him, and he was part of them. The century-old rosebush received special care. Walter pruned, fertilized, and treated it with all affection. Within a few months it was blooming again, more beautiful than ever. It was a symbol of everything they had faced. It seemed dead, neglected, but with proper care, it bloomed again. 1 year after the stroke, Mr. Harrison organized a party at the mansion. He had almost completely recovered his speech and could walk with a cane. He invited all the employees, old and new, invited their families, invited friends from decades. In the middle of the party, he asked for everyone's attention. "I want to make an announcement," he said, his voice still slow but firm. "Walter is no longer my gardener. He is my partner. He will manage the support center we created together, and we'll have a share of the family business because he is family." The hall erupted in applause. Walter's eyes were teary, not knowing what to say. "I don't need this, Mr. Harrison. You've already done so much for me." "You do need it, and you deserve it. You saved my life, saved my dignity, fought when no one would have." Brian was also emotional. He approached and hugged Walter. "Welcome officially to the family," he said. "For real this time." Jennifer also hugged the gardener, thanking him for everything he had done for her father. It was a moment of recognition, of justice, of true love. Walter had spent 30 years caring for those gardens, that house, that family, and now he was being recognized not as an employee, but as someone essential, as someone loved. The news about Amanda spread through the city. She tried to start over elsewhere, but her reputation followed her. Her previous schemes came to light. Other people she had tried to deceive came forward. She ended up facing several lawsuits and losing everything. But neither Walter nor Mr. Harrison took pleasure in her misfortune. They felt sorry. Amanda had had so much, had a family, a comfortable life, opportunities, but greed, limitless ambition, destroyed everything. "It's sad," said Mr. Harrison one day while they were tending to the roses together. "She could have been happy, but chose the wrong path." "People make choices," replied Walter, "and have to live with the consequences. You always chose right." "I tried, Mr. Harrison. It wasn't always easy. There were times I thought about giving up, about leaving, about letting you fend for yourself. But you didn't give up." "No, because you never gave up on me. Remember when my wife got sick? You paid for all the treatments, gave me time off, supported me. How could I abandon you when you needed me?" It was different. It wasn't. It was loyalty. It was gratitude. It was love. The same things you've always shown me. The two fell silent for a moment, working side by side as they had for decades. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story. Have you experienced or know someone who went through a similar situation? Do you believe Walter made the right decisions? Leave your opinion in the comments. We love reading what you think. And don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one. Thank you for joining us this far.